My name is Luke. I'm an elementary principal, finishing my 6th year in SIO. And I'm mostly doing this because I miss teaching. And so I thought I would be stuck in the basement of the Shiloh Inn on Friday. But apparently they put me here at 10 today. So I'm excited to be here. I hope something I share with you guys will be helpful as you guys work with little kids and big kids and yourselves. So I'm kind of going to take you through my journey of processing and understanding myself and how I help teachers and staff to do better work, and then how that's trickled down to kids and our efforts to build a culture of kindness and hard work. And so I'll try to tell some stories, and I'll try to add some useful strategies here at the end. It started with, I read a biography several years ago about a fighter pilot named John Boyd, whose career was marked by trying to turn around the culture or the work that happened in the Pentagon designing fighter jets. And the Pentagon, if there was ever a bureaucracy that was convoluted and invested in overspending things, that would be it. And so he was known as a fighter even in that environment, and built for himself what they called the fighter mafia in the 70s and the 80s, where they were trying to undermine the spend more and add more features mentality of that bureaucracy to make something that was streamlined and focused on one word. And so what he did in his career is develop this group of guys who were willing to sacrifice their careers to go along and get along, to do what everyone else wanted them to do, and instead to do something that was worth doing. And his question that he always asked, and this is where it was really meaningful to me, is, are you trying, you're going to have to decide in your career whether you're going to do something great or be someone great. And if your goal is to be someone great, there's going to come a point where good work will be sacrificed because you'll want to protect your reputation. And so his motto was, stop trying to be great and just do good work. And that really affected me, and I really thought about my own insecurities as a new principal and what I was doing to try to preserve and protect my reputation or my own sense of being effective, and in the process sacrificing really good work that I could have been doing that would be risky, that might not work out. And as I've pondered this question, I've come to realize that this is at the heart of the growth mindset. When people struggle with a fixed mindset, I'm sure many of you have heard this. It's a pretty common idea. What a fixed mindset in my mind is you're trying to prove. You're trying to prove that you're smart. As you know, and we encounter kids who often are struggling with that question, and we tend to praise and try to motivate with that same sort of mentality of trying to prove something, because we often get stuck in the same process and the same mindset. So what I want to present to you guys today is the idea that, first of all, to stop trying to prove anything about yourself. Stop trying to get your staff to prove anything about themselves, and in the process build a school where kids don't have to prove that they're good enough or that they are smart, but rather that they can just be and do good work without having to carry that question around. So I have a diagram, and let's see if my mouse will carry it through. It looks like it won't, so I'll go arrows. So trying to understand myself and kids, I really broke it down to what's the mindset that kids get in, what is the need that their behavior comes from, and then what are the symptoms or the style? What does it look like when they're working in this mindset? So the first one that we all encounter is this need for significance, that we all feel a need to matter. And little kids feel it intensely, as do we, but they have such little control over their lives that they are looking for that feeling of significance from others. And that's what plays itself out as really impulsive behavior, and what we all see as attention seeking, right? And that's kind of the heart of this. Attention seeking behavior comes out, in my experience, in two ways. That kids get really needy or they get really strong-willed, but they're always trying to get from us, the adults in their lives, or from their peers, a sense that I matter, and so you're paying attention to me because I matter, right? The clouds on either side are adult behavior. So what some adults do is they say all they want is attention, therefore I'm not going to give it to them. And they ignore that misbehavior, that attention-seeking behavior, and then explode when they've had enough, right? And the ignorer always gets more and more angry until they can't take it anymore. On the other side, we have some adults who want to counteract that and be the loving person in that kid's life, and so they're appeasing that bad behavior and rescuing them out of those consequences. But the result is both of those mentalities from adults actually increase the attention-seeking behavior because they communicate in two different ways that that kid doesn't matter. Because if you ignore them, of course you communicate that, right? But also if you appease them, what you're saying is, I don't think you can do this, so I have to go and do it for you. I don't think you can handle the consequences, so I have to go and handle them for you. And in the beginning, kids like it, but over time it reinforces this idea that not only do I not matter, but I don't have what it takes to handle the world, right? And so our ignoring or our protectionism makes it worse. And there's always this underlying fear behind it, a fear that you don't matter. And I've wrestled with this in my life extensively, and everybody I know or have talked to about this could say the same. That question of significance is at the heart of a lot of destructive behavior if you don't handle it, or in my view, if you don't put it down. Because you can't always answer it. You think you do, and as soon as you do, it comes back. As soon as you've accomplished something, that school year's over and you got another school year, right? I heard a great story from somebody who had won the NBA championship. And they were in the locker room and everybody was excited and they had this overwhelming sense of depression that now I have to do this again. I thought this would answer it. I thought this would show that I was the best. But I just realized immediately that I'm just going to have to get back on the train and do it all over again. So what I wanted myself to do and my staff and the kids at my school is to put that question down completely and say we don't ask that question, we put it away because it's unanswerable. What I found is that kids transition based on this idea of self-awareness, where they become aware of their own weaknesses, they begin to compare themselves to others. For a lot of kids, it starts to happen about 4th grade, right? You start to see that kind of mean girl behavior starts to pop up. You start to see kids posturing on the playground of who's good at football and who's not, and other things like that, that sort of behavior. And it sends kids to a new place. Instead of being attention-seeking, it sends them to what we call power struggling. So what they're doing is they're struggling with themselves and they're struggling with others. With themselves, they're seeking out perfectionism, and underneath it, there's always this undercurrent of self-loathing at their own weaknesses. And on the other side, they're judgmental toward others and trying to dominate in their behavior. And we call it a pendulum because it swings from one to the other. And the more that someone is stuck in this mentality of power struggle, the more of both you'll get. I was listening to a lecture by a psychologist that call it the shame and blame cycle. Right? Shame is more than guilt. It's a sense that something is wrong with you, not just with what you've done. And that cycle can be incredibly destructive, although on the outside it can look really successful. Because what usually happens is people cover up that part of their life. They don't show other people to shame. And so from the outside, they're succeeding. They're working really hard. They're winning. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work for a lot of reasons, as I'm sure you've imagined. The need switches from significance to control. I was talking to our behavior specialist who's had many, many decades of working with kids through traumatic circumstances. And the more trauma or difficulty a kid has had in their life, the earlier they switch down into power struggling. If you ever see a 1st grader who's there, you think, whoa, they've had a hard early childhood, right? Because it sends them down quicker because they're more aware that something's wrong with me and with my life compared to all these other kids. And sometimes you'll see a kid get all the way to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade totally unaware that people are even doing this. And that's that self-awareness piece that comes later for other kids. So control and significance are both healthy needs. Everybody has those needs. It's a significant part of everybody's life. But to the degree it runs you, it's a driver, is to the degree you'll be in this unhealthy cycle of shame and blame. The way I figured this out, or we really realized it, was when we started to look at our behavior data mid-year this year. Suddenly the behaviors at lunch, recess, and cafeteria were spiking. It was like low behavior issues until suddenly 12:15, it just jumped up and it stayed solid until afternoon recess was over. And what we realized was that at lunch recess, the classroom teachers they're on lunch. So they don't manage behavior at lunch recess, and likewise in the cafeteria. So the result was that the main accountability adult in their life was absent, and that's when they were saving up their misbehavior. And that's deliberate. So that's just not the kid who is impulsive and can't control their behavior. They're deciding now's the time. And to me, that was, 12:15 was the 4th and 5th grade lunch recess. And so seeing that progression of where did that behavior come from? Because having been with these kids for 6 years now, I know these kids, and this shift was really dramatic. And I thought, well, what were these kids doing 2 years ago? They weren't doing this. And that idea that the attention seeker, unresolved, heads down into this was like a big aha moment for us and how we manage and support kids. To bring them, to change our language, but also to change how we think about kids and support them and diagnose what's going on in them, to get them back up. And I'll show you how that works in a sec. Because this is really below, in a sense, the attention seeking. One last thing I'll say is, the longer someone stays down here, the more likely they are to build a wall on one side or the other. And as I've pondered this, I see a lot of mental health concerns that come up when those walls get built. So some people internalize their frustration with life and their weaknesses, and they build a wall and say it's not other people's fault. Sometimes that blame will come, but it'll bounce off that wall and head right back over. And then other people will build a wall on the other side, and you'll get this flashes of insecurity and flashes of shame, but then it comes right back over and says, no, I have to dominate others and prove that I'm the best. But both of those are really unhealthy and not the place we want to bring kids or be ourselves. So if the question is doing or being, and if we say, well, I want to be somebody great, I want to be that smart kid, I want to be the kid who's the best at something, and if that drives us down into eventually a place of really unhealthy power struggling with others and ourselves, then what would happen if instead you just chose the work? And where would you go from there? And what's our goal to bring kids to? Where are we headed? So what we head toward is this idea of, instead of significance and control, we have a purpose. And a purpose is not proving what we are, which is where significance goes. And a purpose it's going to be larger than ourselves, it's going to be outside of us in a lot of ways, but we're going to contribute to it. So we don't have to be in control of it because it doesn't define us. But it's still a significant need that we all have. And then the style, the mentality, or the symptoms of that are creativity. That place where you're not proving is a place where you can be really creative. And one of the things I've learned, and many of you have probably seen this too, that purpose and creativity are ways to take a power-struggling kid who's way down at the bottom and quickly bring them up and say, I've got a really important job for you to do and I really need your help. And giving that kid a purpose that's significant outside of themselves can bring them suddenly up. In the same way, a creative outlet, something that's meaningful but requires them to think and solve problems themselves, can also be a really easy lever to bring kids up. And we call it problem-solving mindset. So problem-solving mindset sees the problem outside of yourself. When a kid or an adult is functioning in this mindset, they're going to be content with themselves, looking to grow. And with others, there's going to be a place of trust and generosity, even self-sacrifice. And one of the big things you're going to see, actually let me go back to that, is that you can be at any one of these places at any given time. Depending on how you're feeling, how effective you are in the setting you're in. If you're new to a job or new to a setting, if suddenly a kid is doing bad at math, right, that'll put them into the question of, well, can I even do math? Which you hear a lot of as a former math teacher. So there's people who stay in one place or another more often, but it's not a permanent diagnosis. Okay, so how do we get kids and ourselves up? And so we call it a ladder. It has 3 rungs. One is genuine affection. If you don't genuinely care about those kids on an individual basis, they will smell it, and you won't be able to help. You might be able to control them, but you won't be able to help them. The second thing is strategic support. It has lots of stars on it because that's easy to say but hard to do. There's tons of strategies out there, and we'll go through some of them. And then the last is the high expectations. What you're doing is, some people say, well, I hold them to high expectations. And other people say, well, I really care about them. But you have to do both. And that's the warm and firm. You have to be able to be warm and firm together. Most people tend toward one or the other as a preference or as a personality expression, but you have to do both side by side. So if you want to think of them as the rungs of or the sides of the ladder, you have to have both sides or the ladder doesn't work very well. Let's see if I can show it to you. So I have a chalkboard in my office. This is all drawn on. But I wanted to show you this to see the progression and to see the fact that you enter from this side. Kids do at a young age. They start this attention-seeking behavior really early. And it's not necessarily unhealthy unless it continues on too long, right? When a toddler comes up to you and wants affection, no one has any discomfort with that. But when a 5th grader comes up and wants really unhealthy behavior to get everyone to look at them, it's different, right? So everybody has that question of significance. Do they matter? And if left unresolved and unsupported, they head down into this power struggling. But I really believe that to the degree you're here, right, you and I, or kids in general, the only way to get up there is to work your way up. You have to go back up into this vulnerable place of attention seeking before you can get to the top of letting that question go. And that's what you guys feel whenever you are embarrassed, that suddenly your insecurities might be exposed in some unforeseen way, is that vulnerability kind of makes you want to retreat, right? That's you going from a place of, I think I got it together, I think everything's okay, and suddenly you're heading back down or heading back up, right? But so choosing vulnerability and then from there creating safety to get to the top is important. Any questions? It's a big and complicated diagram. I apologize. It's just how I think about things, so I'm hoping it helps. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So I'm going to tell you a few things of what we have done. The first is with staff. How do you build a culture? First, you need staff buy-in. The way that I did this was to present this question of doing and being. And this was, all this stuff, my understanding of it has been developing over the course of several years. So it's been a process of helping them get to that place too. But I was reflecting on my own work and how I was trying to protect myself and my reputation, and that it caused me to lead less effectively for them. And so creating that place of vulnerability with the staff and then challenging them to also put down the question of, are they a good enough teacher, right? Does this state test mean something about me? Or does this Dibbles test tell me that I'm not good enough, right? And say, what if we could all, as a staff, in this room together, put the question down and instead just say, what's the good work that we can do? And let the good work, the purpose that's above us and outside of ourselves, be enough. And so that process took a little while of me kind of posing that and letting it sit before we really made any kind of big changes to the process or changes to how we solve problems or work with kids. The second thing we did was build a team of behaviors, a behavior team. So 4 or 5 teachers in a group. And that when the staff finds a need around behavior management, we bring it up in a staff meeting, people reflect on it, but then it goes to the team. and let that create a group of experts among the teachers, rather than me making a decision about whether the blue slip or the green slip means we do this or do that, right? Or what the dress code should be. But rather to create more and more effective leadership among the staff. And that's been really meaningful. We worked on diagnosing kids, thinking about, when you think about a kid, if you can understand them, it's a lot easier to be patient with them. If you understand yourself too, and how this kid's misbehavior doesn't mean that I'm failing. Or maybe it does mean I'm failing, but is that okay? And can I work through that process of knowing that I'm failing to find a solution and stay in that problem-solving mindset? And that's where the diagram comes in for me, to be able to diagnose a kid and look at them. My special ed teacher often comes in and we sit and look at it, and we talk about our different special ed kids too, whether their behavior or other things, and how they, because they in particular can be very aware as they grow up of their differences from the other kids, and that causes them often to head down instead of up. So looking at how do we support kids to come back up. We also talk about it with respect to ourselves. I was thinking about, that evaluations just finished, and of the teachers that the evaluations are hardest to give, teachers and staff, every teacher who's having a hard time, I can look at it and say, I see where you're power struggling, and that's making it hard for you to work with this kid who keeps misbehaving, or making it hard for you to work with your grade level partner who has different ideas than you have, because you want to protect your territory, you want to protect your reputation. So we have conversations one-on-one, my staff and me, about this as well, and where we all are at different times when we look at our practice. And really the biggest thing is you've got to have those conversations, and in order to create a safe working environment, a place where people care about this, it's got to be part of how you talk. And maybe your diagram will look different when you're done. But one of the conversations we have, being really practical, it's a common theme among, when you talk about PBIS, of are we making the rewards extrinsic? Are we saying you should behave well because we'll give you prizes, or these slips that feel like money? And so what we've talked about is, how are we thinking about those prizes? Are we trying to bribe them into behaving well? And that has a big impact on how they think about them. Or is the slip we give out really just a reminder for us to be thankful to them and creating a stronger relationship between you and kids because you're being thankful for their good behavior? Also, if you think about how do you praise kids, are you praising them for being smart? When I was a middle school teacher, I would start my 6th grade math class and say, raise your hand if your teachers told you that you're smart. And all of them would raise their hand. Which means all but maybe 3 of them, and probably those 3 too, didn't believe their teacher, right? They believed that you said I was smart, and either you're dumb and don't know that I'm not, or you're lying to me. Because kids know. So what we do is shift our praise. We want to praise hard work, and we want to praise people who are vulnerable and take risks with creative ideas, rather than just the kid who can always have the right answer. No kid always has the right answer, but if you let them raise their hand to answer, they only raise it when they have the right answer. So it looks like it, right? So we have pushed through those conversations and then work on our own proving mindset. Are we out to prove, and are we building kids who should be like us? There you go. So a couple of techniques. We pre-teach the grown-ups. We stay thankful for hard work. I mentioned that a little bit with the cards. And then this is a conversation I have in the spring with my staff. Because every spring around April, you come back from spring break, and the teachers start shoulding, right? They should know this by now. Right? And what they're forgetting is that the kids don't actually care about you that much and what you say and all the rules you make. But you feel like they should by now, right? I made this class. It's worked so well. And so reminding the staff to let that go, and that you're going to have to pre-teach kids at every step of the way, and more as you get closer and closer to June. Because they're not thinking about you, they're thinking about their friend, and they're thinking about the sun outside, and they're thinking about lots of other things. And then this is one, triangulating. I learned after we kind of built this idea, is that triangulation in like family therapy is apparently a really bad thing. I don't know if any of you, it's like a strategy that abusers use, so just depending on who you're talking to, you might not use that term too much. But the idea is actually the same. In an abusive relationship, what the abuser might do to try to get you to do what he wants is get other people, to make the triangle, to be on their side against you. Right? What we do as staff is say, here are the behavior expectations that we made as a class, right? Remember when we came back from spring break and we went over this all over again? That you guys were able to contribute to it. We made this, here's what we expect, and here's what, as a community, here's what we expect. And then here are the consequences that happen if that expectation isn't met. And now this becomes that third point of the triangle for us. So that when the kid is misbehaving, that is the referee that brings the punishment. And you become the coach who says, how can I help you follow those rules that have been established by our community? What instead often happens when it's not working well is that the teacher says, these are my rules and you're breaking them, and I'm offended by your breaking my rules that I made to protect my classroom. So an effective way is to say, these rules are ours, and now they sit over here apart from me, and I'm sorry that this happened to you. How can I help you not let this happen again? That works with grading policies really well. Right? If a kid comes and says, how could you have given me that B? I thought I was an A student. Oh wow, I've never given a B. But you see, do you remember the rubric? Do you remember the syllabus we gave out? Right? You're creating a situation where, oh yeah, it's not about a power struggle between me and you. It's you versus the world, and I'm here to help you navigate through the world. All right, so the next step is to build a culture with the kids, bringing the kids together. So we have a social skills curriculum that was inspired by Second Steps, but then we sort of made it our own. We added things like mottos and what we call ideas of the week. So you gather up proverbs from all different, you can do multicultural proverbs to kind of connect to the world. You can do classic sayings and quotes from Mark Twain, has a lot of funny stuff and effective, right? Things that we will say on a regular basis. And then we also have, well, I'll say it again, the social skills curriculum has a lesson, a concept, like dealing with when your friend is angry, right? It'll have a proverb to go with it, and we'll repeat that every day for a week while that's our lesson. And then the teachers go, that's all presented in our, either in announcements or in our morning meeting. And then the teachers go back to class at some point during that week and have a lesson in class that's 20 to 30 minutes discussing the whole concept of dealing with your friend's anger or resolving a conflict, or what do you do when you don't get your way, right? And each week of the school year has its own lesson. Then we have a motto as a school, a phrase that we say all the time. And so that phrase never changes all school year long. It's said every morning at announcements. It's said right after birthdays. And it is that, for us, it is scholars find a way. That's our motto. And then I explain, because a lot of kids say find a way. What does that mean? Right? So you got to explain. It means you don't get to quit. Then I also say the two phrases that go with it. Do good work and be a friend. And so the goal is simply to take out of our goal is always to take them out of the mindset of proving and take them into the mindset of just doing the work that's before you and enjoying it for its own sake. Morning meetings is something that I got 2 years ago, I think, here at this conference. Somebody from like Ben Lapine came and presented their morning meeting structure. And so it took me a year until my behavior support team said, we need something else. We need something that builds this culture and community together. And I said, oh, I happen to have this plan that I've kind of been sitting on, hoping for someone to ask. Here it is.